John Joseph Gotti Jr., born on October 27, 1940, was a prominent and controversial figure in the world of organized crime, eventually rising to become the notorious boss of the Gambino crime family in New York City. Born into a life marked by hardship and scarcity, Gotti grew up in poverty alongside his siblings in the Bronx. His father's sporadic income as a laborer left the family struggling, and this environment became fertile ground for Gotti's early attraction to a life outside the law. As a young teenager, Gotti quickly became entrenched in crime. By age 12, he was already running with street gangs linked to the mafia. Known for his toughness and charm, Gotti soon gained the attention of more established mobsters in New York City's criminal underworld. One particular incident at 14 marked him both physically and mentally. While attempting to steal equipment from a construction site, a heavy cement mixer fell on his foot, leaving him with a permanent limp. Despite the injury, Gotti remained undeterred and continued his rise in the mafia's ranks, becoming a part of the Fulton Rockaway Boys gang and forming ties with future mob heavyweights like Angelo Ruggiero and Wilfred Willie Boy Johnson. In 1958, Gotti met Victoria DiGiorgio, a young woman of mixed Italian and Russian heritage. They married in 1962, starting a family that would eventually include 5 children. Although Gotti briefly attempted to work legitimate jobs as a truck driver and factory presser, he was drawn back into crime. By his mid-20s, he had already served multiple prison sentences, making it clear that a conventional lifestyle wasn't for him. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, Gotti was climbing the ranks of the Gambino family, one of New York's most powerful mafia organizations. He became a protege of Agnello Della Croce, the Gambino family's underboss and a formidable mob figure himself. Under Della Croce's guidance, Gotti honed his skills in various illicit operations, from gambling and loan sharking to racketeering, setting himself apart as one of the Gambino family's top earners. His headquarters was in Ozone Park, Queens, where he was well known, feared, and admired by locals who benefited from his influence and generosity. The relationship between Gotti and the Gambino family's boss, Paul Castellano, however, was not as smooth. Castellano was more conservative and business-minded, running the family with an eye toward discretion and focusing on making connections with legitimate industries. But Gotti's more flamboyant personality and taste for the limelight clashed with Castellano's low-key style, creating tension between the two. This rivalry only grew when members of Gotti's crew were indicted for selling narcotics. Knowing Castellano's strict stance against drug trafficking, Gotti began to worry for his own safety, fearing that the boss would retaliate against him and his brother Gene, who was also involved in narcotics dealings. These fears, combined with Gotti's growing ambition, set the stage for a high-stakes power play within the Gambino family. In December 1985, Gotti orchestrated a dramatic hit on Castellano, who was gunned down outside a Manhattan steakhouse. With Castellano out of the picture, Gotti seized control of the Gambino family, becoming one of the most powerful figures in organized crime. His reign was marked by his flashy lifestyle and his willingness to embrace media attention. Wearing expensive suits and charming the press, Gotti earned the nickname the Dapper Don. His public persona was a departure from the mafia's traditional code of silence and discretion, and he became something of a celebrity, embodying the image of a modern-day gangster. Gotti's high-profile image eventually earned him another nickname, the Teflon Don, after he managed to evade conviction in 3 major trials during the 1980s. Each time, prosecutors failed to secure a conviction due to allegations of jury tampering, witness intimidation, and other questionable tactics. The public watched as he repeatedly escaped the grip of the law, further boosting his reputation. At the height of his power, it was reported that Gotti was earning anywhere from $5 million to $20 million a year as the Gambino boss, a testament to his control over one of America's most lucrative crime syndicates. However, his invincibility was short-lived. Law enforcement officials continued to pursue him relentlessly, and Gotti's downfall came with a betrayal from within his inner circle. Salvatore "Sammy the Bull" Gravano, Gotti's underboss and longtime confidant, decided to turn state's evidence in 1991. Gravano, who had become disillusioned after hearing Gotti belittle him on FBI wiretaps, agreed to testify against his former boss in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony was instrumental in securing Gotti's conviction on multiple charges, including 5 murders, racketeering, obstruction of justice, and tax evasion. In 1992, Gotti was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Imprisoned at the high-security United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, Gotti remained a powerful symbol of the American mafia even as his health declined. Diagnosed with throat cancer, he spent his final years in a prison medical facility, far removed from the luxurious lifestyle he once enjoyed. On June 10, 2002, Gotti succumbed to his illness, dying behind bars. Gotti's legacy is a complex one. On one hand, he was the embodiment of the American gangster, a larger-than-life figure who defied the law and reveled in his status as a public enemy. But his leadership style and the media frenzy he embraced marked a turning point for organized crime in America. Traditional mafia figures resented Gotti's openness and his willingness to court public attention, seeing it as a dangerous departure from the clandestine nature of organized crime. Figures like Anthony "Gaspipe" Casso, underboss of the Lucchese crime family, even went so far as to claim that Gotti's approach contributed to the decline of the mafia's power in the United States, setting off a chain of events that brought increased law enforcement scrutiny on organized crime families. Today, Gotti's story remains one of fascination, his life a reminder of a different era in New York's criminal underworld, a world where power, loyalty, and betrayal were as real as life and death. The Dapper Don may have left an indelible mark on American pop culture, but his legacy in the world of organized crime is more complicated, a blend of charisma, ambition, and ultimately, a cautionary tale about the dangers of fame in a life built on secrecy. From his teenage years, John Gotti was deeply entrenched in the workings of the underworld. By the time he hit his mid-teens, he was already running errands for Carmine Fatico, a prominent captain in what was then the Anastasia family, one of New York's most powerful crime organizations, later rebranded as the Gambino family under the leadership of boss Albert Anastasia. Alongside his brother Gene and friend Angelo Ruggiero, Gotti took part in numerous truck hijackings at Idlewild Airport, now known as John F. Kennedy International Airport, where he quickly gained a reputation among his peers. During this time, Gotti formed an alliance with another up-and-coming figure in the mafia world, Joseph Massino, who would eventually become the head of the Bonanno family. Gotti's brash and relentless nature earned him nicknames like Black John and Crazy Horse, underscoring the ruthless image he cultivated among his associates. It was around this period that Gotti met a man who would greatly influence his career in organized crime, Agnello Neil Della Croce, the Gambino family's formidable underboss. In February of 1968, Gotti's activities attracted the attention of federal authorities. Employees of United Airlines identified him as a suspect who had signed for stolen goods. Shortly after, the FBI arrested him in connection with this hijacking. As fate would have it, while out on bail only 2 months later, Gotti was once again taken into custody, this time for intercepting a shipment of cigarettes worth $50,000 on the New Jersey Turnpike. His penchant for hijacking continued to stack up, and later that same year, he pleaded guilty to a hijacking charge involving Northwest Airlines cargo trucks. This guilty plea led to a 3-year sentence at Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary, temporarily putting his operations on hold. Following his release on parole in 1972, Gotti reunited with his old crew at the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club, working under Fatico. In this setup, he found his footing as a reliable enforcer and was soon tasked with managing the crew's illegal gambling activities, demonstrating his capability in overseeing high-stakes operations. When Fatico was indicted on charges related to loan sharking in 1972, one of the conditions of his release barred him from associating with known felons. Although Gotti had not yet earned the rank of a made man due to the mafia's rules that had closed the membership books after the infamous 1957 Appalachian meeting, Fatico nonetheless appointed him acting captain of the Bergen crew. This appointment solidified Gotti's standing within the Gambino organization. In his new leadership role, Gotti began making frequent trips to Della Croce's headquarters at the Ravenite Social Club, where he would report on the crew's operations. Della Croce, known for his brutal approach and penchant for discipline, took a liking to Gotti, and their mentor-protege relationship deepened. Both men shared a fierce disposition, an inclination for gambling, and a fondness for colorful language, creating a bond that would shape Gotti's future in the mob. The year 1973 brought an opportunity for Gotti to prove his loyalty. When Emmanuel Gambino, a nephew of then-boss Carlo Gambino, was murdered, Gotti was assigned to a hit squad along with Ruggiero and fellow enforcer Ralph Gallioni. Their mission was to hunt down and eliminate James McBratney, a suspected gang rival believed to be responsible for Emmanuel's death. Posing as NYPD detectives, the trio attempted to kidnap McBratney from a bar in Staten Island. However, the operation went awry when a scuffle ensued, leading Gallioni to fatally shoot McBratney. Witnesses at the scene, along with an informant from within law enforcement, identified Gotti as one of the perpetrators, leading to his arrest for McBratney's murder in June 1974. With the assistance of high-powered attorney Roy Cohn, Gotti was able to negotiate a plea deal, reducing his charge to attempted manslaughter. This plea bargain resulted in a relatively light 4-year sentence, considering the circumstances. In later years, Gotti would also be linked to the murder of Vito Borelli, another Gambino associate, as former Bonanno family boss Massino would later allege that Gotti had been involved in Borelli's killing in 1975. Gotti's rapid ascent within the Gambino family did not go unnoticed by law enforcement. Remo Franceschini, a New York City Police Department veteran who specialized in organized crime from 1957 to 1991, was one of the early voices to recognize Gotti's potential. In a 1993 interview, Franceschini revealed the key traits that set Gotti apart, noting that Gotti was a charismatic and natural leader who displayed a sharp mind, a keen memory, and an unwavering loyalty to his crew. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Gotti wasn't drawn to a life of luxury or entangled in romantic enticements. His dedication was instead channeled entirely toward his men and his work, which ultimately elevated him within the mafia's ranks. Franceschini recalled, "There were few men who would go against him. He exuded toughness and had a sharpness about him that made him a standout." The combination of charisma, loyalty, and an innate ability to instill fear in others propelled Gotti toward becoming a powerful figure in the mafia. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Gotti had established himself as one of the most recognizable mobsters in New York City. His willingness to engage in ruthless tactics, coupled with his keen understanding of both people and operations, made him a force to be reckoned with. Over the years, Gotti would go on to cement his reputation as a man of action, someone who understood the inner workings of the underworld and was prepared to use any means necessary to achieve his goals. His life would become a testament to the power, allure, and peril that accompanied a career in organized crime, leaving a legacy as one of the most infamous figures in mob history. Carlo Gambino, a powerful figure in the criminal underworld, passed away quietly at his home on October 15, 1976. Contrary to expectations, Gambino handpicked Paul Castellano as his successor, rather than his loyal underboss, Agnello Della Croce. Gambino likely saw Castellano's business acumen, particularly in white-collar ventures, as beneficial for the family's future. At the time, Della Croce was serving time for tax evasion and couldn't contest the decision. After Gambino's death, Castellano's position was affirmed in a meeting on November 24th, where Della Croce was present. Castellano offered Della Croce the underboss position in an attempt to maintain harmony, but this arrangement effectively created a rift within the Gambino family, splitting it into two competing factions. During this period of transition, the Gambino family reopened its membership books in 1976. John Gotti, a rising figure, was released from prison in July 1977 after serving 2 years. Under Castellano's leadership, Gotti became part of the Gambino family and quickly rose in ranks, taking control of the Bergen crew, previously led by Carmine Fatico. Gotti's crew, answering directly to Della Croce, benefited from this relationship, establishing Gotti as Della Croce's protege and one of his most profitable earners. Gotti ran lucrative ventures, including his own loan sharking operations, and had a no-show job as a plumbing supply salesman, which allowed him to collect a steady income while keeping his criminal activities somewhat shielded. FBI informants alleged that Gotti might have been involved in financing drug deals, though these claims were never fully substantiated. One of Gotti's most infamous involvements came in December 1978, with the Lufthansa heist at Kennedy Airport. The heist, one of the most significant cash robberies in history, was meticulously planned. Gotti arranged for the getaway van to be destroyed at a Brooklyn scrapyard, but his driver, Parnell Stacks Edwards, failed to follow through. Instead of delivering the van to the scrapyard, Edwards left it parked near a fire hydrant, drawing attention and leading to major repercussions. Gotti, despite his deep involvement in the mob, was cautious about shielding his family from his criminal life. However, his son, John Jr., had joined the mob as an associate by 1982. Tragedy struck the Gotti family on March 18, 1980, when Gotti's youngest son, Frank, was killed in a tragic accident involving a neighbor, John Favara, who accidentally hit Frank with his car while the boy was on a mini-bike. Although Frank's death was officially ruled accidental, the incident led to heightened tensions. Gotti's wife, still mourning, attacked Favara with a baseball bat when he came to express his condolences. 4 months after the accident, Favara was abducted and disappeared without a trace. It's widely believed that Gotti ordered the murder, though he and his family were vacationing in Florida when Favara vanished. As Gotti continued to climb in influence, he faced legal troubles. In 1984, he was indicted on assault charges following a conflict with a refrigerator mechanic. The following year, Gotti, Della Croce, and others from the Bergen crew were indicted in a significant racketeering case led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Diane Giacalone. This indictment uncovered a betrayal from within. One of Gotti's close associates, Wilfred Willie Boy Johnson, had been working as an FBI informant. During this period, Gotti grew increasingly disillusioned with Castellano's leadership, seeing him as distant and excessively profit-driven. Like many within the family, Gotti believed Castellano lacked the credibility that came from street experience, leading to mounting resentment. Further complicating matters, Gotti had ongoing disputes with Castellano over the financial cut from their hijacking operations at Kennedy Airport. Rumors also suggested that Gotti was exploring drug trafficking, a lucrative but risky venture that Castellano had explicitly banned under threat of severe punishment. Gotti's associates, including his brother, Gene Gotti, and friend Angelo Ruggiero, found themselves in trouble when they were arrested on heroin distribution charges in 1983. Much of the evidence stemmed from surveillance placed in Ruggiero's home. True to his word, Castellano demanded access to the recordings, as he had forbidden drug dealings within the family. Ruggiero resisted, refusing to turn over the transcripts, which strained his position within the family, and led Castellano to consider demoting Gotti. In 1984, Castellano faced his own legal battles and was indicted in a RICO case tied to the violent crimes committed by Roy DeMeo's crew, notorious enforcers within the Gambino family. The following year, he was again indicted for his involvement in the mafia's governing body, known as the Commission. Facing the likelihood of a life sentence, Castellano appointed Gotti, along with Thomas Bellotti and Thomas Gambino, to share responsibilities as acting bosses in his absence. During this time, Gotti began secretly conspiring to overthrow Castellano, aligning with key allies such as Frank DeSico, Joseph Joe Piney Armone, and soldiers like Sammy the Bull Gravano and Robert D.B. DiBernardo. This group, later nicknamed the Fist, shared a common goal: removing Castellano from power. They were convinced that Castellano would eventually turn against them and believed his leadership weakened the Gambino family. Armone's support was particularly valuable, as his long-standing ties to the family's founder gave credibility to their cause. Historically, mafia rules prohibited killing a boss without approval from the Commission, a rule held for decades. Gotti's plan was audacious. If successful, it would mark the first unsanctioned assassination of a five-family's boss since the 1950s. Gotti knew approaching the other bosses was risky. Castellano's strong ties, especially with Vincent the Chin Gigante of the Genovese family, would likely tip them off. Instead, Gotti sought the support of key figures within the Lucchese, Colombo, and Bonanno families, bypassing the need for commission approval. With Joseph N. Gallo, Gambino's consigliere, on his side, Gotti felt he had sufficient backing to take action. Through a mixture of cunning, alliances, and his own reputation, Gotti positioned himself to reshape the Gambino family. This decision would set the stage for one of the most infamous shifts in mafia history, with consequences reverberating through organized crime for years. In the world of organized crime, the late 1980s witnessed a dramatic shift within the Gambino crime family. After the passing of Agnello Della Croce, a respected Gambino underboss, in December 1985, Paul Castellano, then the boss of the family, revised his plans for leadership. He appointed Thomas Gambino as acting boss while positioning Thomas Bellotti, a close confidant, as the new underboss. Castellano also aimed to dismantle John Gotti's crew, a group that had been gaining influence. This decision sparked anger within the family, especially in Gotti, who was already frustrated with Castellano's absence from Della Croce's wake. Seeing it as a sign of disrespect and a shift in power, Gotti resolved to eliminate Castellano and seize control. The opportunity arose on December 16, 1985, when Gotti learned through Frank DeSico, a Gambino member, that Castellano and Bellotti would meet at Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. That evening, Under Gotti's command, assassins lay in wait. As Castellano and Bellotti arrived, the ambush took place, resulting in the deaths of both men. Gotti and his ally, Sammy the Bull Gravano, observed the assassination from a nearby car, watching as their bold plan unfolded.
Got Paul, Frankie the Chico when he was alive, and John, and we were, everybody knows the story. John with the tapes, and Paul got killed, and John Gotti became the boss. But that's not the story. What happened before? Who was involved? How many? What was the problems? Why were you going to kill Paul? Nobody asked that question. Nobody asked the question of, you're sitting in the car at 5:30 at night in Manhattan, right before Christmas. There's tens of thousands of people coming out of these buildings all at once. They're not going home now, hustling home. They're waiting for their families who meet them. They go eat, they go see the lights, they go shopping. The crowds are astronomical. Nobody asks, what were you doing? What were you thinking in that car with John? John was my driver, by the way. I had the walkie-talkie, I had everything. So when we're talking about that, let me get back to that. We're talking about the hit. John says, we could do this and we could do that. And I says, an idea. And he says, no, let me. So Frankie Chico says, oh, Frankie Chico knows I was involved in 2 wars already with the Colombos and then with Nicky Scoffo in Philadelphia. So he says, no, listen, Sammy's done this. Let him plot this out. And I plotted that hit. I'm the guy in the car with a walkie-talkie, with a gun. I made myself a backup shooter. So there's 11 people on there. We're going to kill Castellano. So there's crash car, backup shooters, the 4 guys who are going to shoot. Everybody's in place. What's my position? I'm a backup shooter. I'm in the car and I'm calling the shots. While I'm sitting in the car, it's packed and my eyes are all over the place. There's 2 fucking cops on the corner. And that's only a couple hundred feet away from me. I says, oh my God, this comes down. These cops are going to pull out their guns and make a move. My job now, the guy who's not pulling the trigger, is to go there and kill them so that the shooters can get away. So when you say, well, you weren't the shooter, my job now is to kill them. And I'm sick. I don't want to kill these 2 cops, but I know what my job is. Thank God, just before they came, they turned around and started walking up the avenue, chatting the other way. So they weren't there. There's actually a cop, from what I know and the government knew, who saw it. And the FBI asked them, why the fuck didn't you pull out your gun? He said, this was so fucking professionally done. I'm not a fucking fool. There must have been backup shooters over. This guy was 100 feet, maybe 75 feet ahead of me.
With Castellano eliminated, Gotti quickly consolidated his power within the family. He was placed on a temporary 3-man committee, alongside Joseph Gallo and DeSico, to manage the Gambino operations, while a new boss was selected. However, it was widely understood that Gotti was the true leader. By January 1986, during a meeting with the family's capos, Gotti was officially recognized as the new boss. DeSico became his underboss, and Gallo remained as consigliere. This takeover marked Gotti's rapid rise in notoriety. The Gambino family, already one of the most powerful in the American mafia, was now under the command of a boss whose bold and public persona quickly captivated the media and the public. Gotti's rise was not just about power but also about influence. As boss, he reportedly earned between $5 million and $12 million annually, reflecting the wealth and influence that came with his position. To protect himself from legal repercussions, Gotti prohibited his members from accepting plea deals that could confirm the organization's existence. At his trials, Gotti's charisma often took center stage. He would smile and wave at cameras, creating an image that both fascinated and bewildered the public. This media-savvy approach endeared him to some, adding to his mythos as a Teflon Don, a man seemingly immune to prosecution. One example of his intimidation tactics involved a man named Romuald Pichik. Gotti had been implicated in an attack on Pichik, yet when it came time for the trial, Pichik claimed he could not recall his assailant, effectively shutting down the case. This reversal came after reports that Gambino members had stalked Pichik, cut his brake lines, and made threatening calls, demonstrating Gotti's ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. In April 1986, tragedy struck within Gotti's inner circle. Frank DeSico, his newly appointed underboss, was killed in a car bombing orchestrated by rival mobsters from the Lucchese family. Victor Amuso and Anthony Casso, acting on orders from Vincent the Chin Gigante and Lucchese boss Anthony Corallo, sought revenge for Castellano's death by targeting Gotti's associates. Bombings were rare in the American mafia due to the risk of harming innocent bystanders, leading the Gambino family to suspect Sicilian mafiosi, or Zips, who were known for using explosives. This incident underscored the high-stakes environment of New York's underworld, where alliances could shift suddenly and dramatically. The repercussions of the bombing had a legal impact as well. Judge Eugene Nickerson, overseeing Gotti's racketeering case, postponed the trial to avoid potential bias in the jury due to the recent violence. Gotti's legal troubles worsened when the judge revoked his bail over allegations of witness intimidation, such as those in the Peaceseek case. Despite this, Gotti continued to assert his control from jail, orchestrating the murder of Robert DiBernardo, who had been vying to replace DeSico. DiBernardo's ambition, coupled with an accusation from Ruggiero, a close Gotti associate, marked him as a potential threat, ultimately leading to his demise. By August 1986, jury selection for Gotti's racketeering trial resumed. The trial was a high-profile event, with Gotti facing charges alongside several associates, including his former friend Wilfred Willie Boy Johnson, who had been exposed as an informant. Despite the severity of the charges, Gotti managed to sway the outcome by leveraging connections within the jury. Juror number 11, George Pape, secretly held ties to Bosco Radonjic, leader of the Westies gang. Through this connection, Gravano reportedly arranged for Pape to accept a $60,000 bribe to secure Gotti's acquittal. Gotti's defense lawyer, Bruce Cutler, used an aggressive strategy, portraying the government's case as a personal vendetta against his client. He dismissed the existence of the Gambino family, asserting that the charges were based on nothing more than a smear campaign. The defense also attacked the credibility of prosecution witnesses who had criminal histories of their own. One colorful moment in the trial involved Cutler calling a disgraced bank robber, Matthew Traynor, who alleged that prosecutor Diane Giacalone had made improper advances toward him. While Judge Nickerson found these claims wholly unbelievable, the spectacle underscored Gotti's tactic of using sensational claims to shift attention away from his own actions. Despite the extensive evidence and witnesses lined up against him, Gotti's ability to manipulate the legal process and media attention helped him evade conviction, reinforcing his reputation as an untouchable figure in organized crime. However, his strategy of intimidation and bribery would ultimately set the stage for a series of events that would eventually bring down his empire. Through a mix of charm, ruthlessness, and manipulation, Gotti had managed to climb to the top of one of the most powerful mafia families in the United States, but his reign would also draw increasing scrutiny from law enforcement and set in motion his eventual downfall. The intricate and perilous web of organized crime, Gotti's story illustrates the volatile mix of loyalty, power, and ambition that defines the world of the mafia. A world where a single betrayal or a moment of weakness could lead to a swift and violent end. This chapter in Gotti's life highlights both the allure and the inherent dangers of a lifestyle built on dominance and deception, leaving a legacy that continues to captivate the public's imagination even decades later. The saga of John Gotti's life in the underworld is nothing short of extraordinary, shaped by courtroom drama, covert alliances, and a reputation that earned him the nickname the Teflon Don. Known for his confident demeanor and charisma, Gotti's resilience in the face of legal battles made him a media sensation and a controversial icon in American crime history. But his path to notoriety wasn't solely built on his presence alone. It involved clever manipulations, intense loyalty from his inner circle, and a deep-seated connection with the feared and respected Gambino crime family. In the mid-1980s, Gotti faced an uphill battle with prosecutors who were determined to dismantle his criminal empire. However, as recounted by mob writers Jerry Capecci and Gene Mustin, the proceedings took an unexpected turn. When the jury began deliberations, many were ready to convict. But with insider Anthony Pape securing a spot as a juror and secretly vowing to hold out for acquittal, Gotti had a lifeline. Pape's interference assured Gotti that, at worst, he would face a hung jury. True to his promise, Pape's stance not only shifted the jury's decision, but also raised concerns about their personal safety, leading to a unanimous decision to acquit Gotti on March 13, 1987. The verdict, which cleared him and his associates of charges like loan sharking, illegal gambling, and truck hijacking, was a significant victory, even though Pape would later serve time for obstruction of justice. Gotti's victory came at a time when authorities were aggressively targeting organized crime, notably through successful convictions in the Mafia Commission trial. So when Gotti managed to walk free, it was a serious blow to federal prosecutors and solidified his image as an untouchable figure in the mob world. The media quickly dubbed him the Teflon Don, as charges seemed to slide off him without consequence. But even as Gotti celebrated his acquittal, his associates weren't as fortunate. Gambino underboss Joseph Armone and consigliere Joseph Gallo faced their own racketeering charges in 1986, resulting in convictions by the end of 1987. Meanwhile, Gotti's brother Gene and close associate Angelo Ruggiero were also entangled in heroin trafficking trials that would dog the family for years. Gotti, always strategic, prepared for potential upheavals in the family's structure. As Armone and Gallo faced prison time, he promoted Sammy the Bull Gravano, a move that would later have serious repercussions. Frank Locascio was also elevated to acting underboss, stepping in for Armone when necessary. Gotti's foresight didn't stop at promotions. He and his associates attempted to manipulate the jury in the heroin trials, leading to multiple mistrials and further solidifying his reputation as a cunning operator. Angelo Ruggiero, a longtime confidant, also saw his relationship with Gotti sour during this period. Blamed for attracting unwanted attention and scrutiny, Ruggiero's illness and subsequent release from prison in 1989 were not enough to earn Gotti's forgiveness. In fact, Gotti's cold demeanor reportedly left him reluctant to even attend Ruggiero's funeral, an act that shocked Gravano. Despite Gravano's warnings, Gotti's habit of holding weekly meetings at the Ravenite Social Club in Little Italy became routine in early 1988. His capos gathered here for what Gravano considered an unnecessary risk, exposing the upper ranks of the Gambino family to FBI surveillance. Under the leadership of Bruce Moe, the FBI tracked these gatherings and placed bugs throughout the club, allowing them to capture critical conversations among Gotti and his capos. Although high-quality incriminating recordings were elusive at first, it was a stark departure from traditional mafia protocols, where discretion and secrecy were paramount. Gotti's dealings extended beyond the Gambino family and reached other families in New York. In a 1988 commission meeting, he met with Vincent the Chin Gigante of the Genovese family and Lucchese boss Vittorio Little Vic Amuso. The meeting's goal was to ease rising tensions and ensure the families maintained a united front amidst FBI pressure. The bosses agreed on protocols to prevent future conflicts, though Gigante's wariness kept him from allowing Joe Massino's Bonanno family back onto the commission. Gotti's influence didn't end at New York's borders either. He leveraged his sway over the New Jersey-based De Cavalcante family, showing up at the wake of the De Cavalcante patriarch in a show of force that solidified his control over them until his eventual imprisonment. Amidst all this, Gotti inducted his son, John Gotti Jr., into the Gambino family on Christmas Eve of 1988, ensuring the family's legacy would continue. Gravano, tasked with overseeing the initiation ceremony, tried to maintain impartiality and avoid accusations of nepotism, but John Jr.'s rise was swift. By the end of the year, he had already been promoted to the rank of capo, strengthening the family's lineage and potentially complicating his father's public image, as well as the Gambino's long-term stability. Despite this well-orchestrated empire, Gotti remained wary of threats within and outside the organization. One such instance involved real estate developer Fred Weiss, who was suspected of turning informant. To neutralize this risk, Gotti enlisted the De Cavalcantes to eliminate Weiss, which they carried out efficiently. This action demonstrated Gotti's ruthlessness in preserving his power, but also showed the depths to which he would go to protect the family's secrets. In 1989, law enforcement grew wise to Gotti's methods, uncovering his habit of using a nearby apartment to discuss sensitive matters, out of reach of the bugs planted at the Ravenite. Once the apartment was also bugged, FBI agents obtained crucial insights into Gotti's role as the Gambino family's boss. In one conversation with Locascio, Gotti candidly discussed ordering multiple hits, including those of Thomas Tommy DiBernardo and Louis Melito, showcasing the brutal methods he employed to ensure loyalty and obedience within his ranks. Even soldier Louis de Bono's reluctance to meet Gotti led to a violent end in 1990, another sign of Gotti's zero-tolerance policy for insubordination. When Union official John O'Connor crossed Gotti by targeting a Gambino-affiliated restaurant, Gotti didn't hesitate to order retaliation, leading to O'Connor's assault. Though the FBI linked Gotti to the case, Armed with recordings and witness testimony, he managed to escape yet another conviction in February 1990. His acquittal ignited celebratory fireworks and underscored his growing status as a folk hero in his neighborhood, even as FBI officials warned the public against glorifying him. To them, Gotti was far from a Robin Hood figure. He was the ruthless head of New York's largest mafia family, flanked by loyal but dangerous enforcers. Gotti's Teflon reputation could only last so long, though. The FBI's relentless pursuit, combined with Gotti's own missteps, would eventually bring him to face justice. His life, both feared and celebrated, illustrates the intense loyalty and violence that defined organized crime in New York during his reign. A stark reminder of the power and peril woven into the world of the American mafia. The story of John Gotti, the notorious Gambino crime boss, is filled with intrigue, betrayal, and a downfall that captured the attention of the public and law enforcement alike. As Gotti's empire grew, so did the surveillance on him, with the FBI placing hidden listening devices in his Ravenite social club. These bugs captured not only conversations about his criminal activities, but also his attempts to manipulate juries and avoid conviction. In one case, it was later discovered that the FBI had intercepted Gotti discussing plans to influence a jury, as he had in a previous racketeering trial. This revelation sparked outrage among Manhattan District Attorney Robert Morgenthau and other local officials who claimed they would have demanded a mistrial had they known about these recordings. In December 1990, federal agents raided the Ravenite, arresting Gotti, along with his trusted lieutenant Sammy "the Bull" Gravano and consigliere Frank Locascio. This marked the beginning of Gotti's most serious legal battle yet, with federal prosecutors charging him with a range of crimes including 5 murders, conspiracy, loan sharking, illegal gambling, obstruction of justice, bribery, and tax evasion. Among the murder victims attributed to Gotti was his former boss, Paul Castellano, whom Gotti allegedly ordered killed to assume leadership of the Gambino family. The government had amassed enough evidence, thanks to the Ravenite tapes, to deny bail for Gotti and his associates. Additionally, Gotti's defense attorneys Bruce Cutler and Gerald Shargel were disqualified from the case, as prosecutors argued that they were involved in the criminal organization to a degree that could make them potential witnesses. This case highlighted the tension brewing within the Gambino family. The tapes uncovered by the FBI revealed a rift between Gotti and Gravano, with Gotti allegedly accusing Gravano of being overly ambitious and greedy. He even suggested that Gravano had a leading role in certain murders, including those of Gambino family members. Gravano, feeling betrayed and recognizing that his chances of winning the case were slim without his previous attorney, ultimately decided to cooperate with the government. His decision to testify was a landmark moment in organized crime history, as he became one of the highest-ranking members of a New York crime family to turn state's witness. The trial against Gotti and Locascio began in early 1992 in a Brooklyn federal court. To prevent jury tampering, the jury was kept anonymous and sequestered for the duration of the trial, a first for a Brooklyn federal case. Prosecutors made a compelling case, playing tapes that depicted Gotti discussing various criminal activities and his long-standing animosity toward Castellano, which painted a clear motive for his former boss's murder. Gravano's testimony proved invaluable, as he provided detailed accounts of Gotti's involvement in various crimes and admitted to having personally participated in 19 murders, linking Gotti to several of them.
To the Gotti tapes, it's clear John was setting my father up.
And I realized that John probably eventually would take me out for no other reason but he wants one show, one boss of John Gotti. He don't want anybody to be his equal. He don't want anybody in any way, shape, or form to shine. And I guess I was shining too much.
Making it sound like high school.
Yeah, but the only thing is that in high school you could throw a spitball at somebody. We use bullets.
So Sammy the Bull betrays everything he once pledged a blood oath to, going from one of the most powerful figures in the New York City Mafia to its most infamous informant.
They have said you are the single most important witness ever to testify against the mob.
I think I am. An underboss is the highest position who's ever cooperated, but I think I'm in a position of being the most knowledgeable underboss.
Despite the efforts of Gotti's new defense attorney, Albert Krieger, to discredit Gravano's statements and weaken the prosecution's case, Gravano's testimony held up under cross-examination. The prosecution presented additional evidence and audio recordings that reinforced their case, and on April 2, 1992, after just 14 hours of deliberation, the jury found Gotti guilty on all counts. The verdict marked a significant victory for the FBI and a pivotal moment in the history of organized crime prosecution. James Fox, an assistant director with the FBI, famously declared, "The Teflon is gone, the Don is covered with Velcro, and all the charges stuck." On June 23, 1992, Gotti was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, along with a hefty fine. He was incarcerated in a high-security federal prison in Marion, Illinois, where he spent much of his time in isolation, confined to his cell for 23 hours a day. His attempts to appeal the conviction were ultimately unsuccessful, with his last appeal rejected by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1994. Even in prison, Gotti's infamy persisted. In 1996, he was assaulted by another inmate, allegedly after making a racial remark. Gotti reportedly sought revenge, attempting to involve the Aryan Brotherhood, a prison gang, to retaliate against his attacker. However, his target was later transferred to a different facility, foiling the plan. While Gotti's grip on the Gambino family weakened, he continued to assert his title as boss. His brother Peter and son John Jr. acted as his intermediaries, relaying orders to the family. By the late 1990s, John Jr. had risen to the role of acting boss, but faced legal troubles of his own, ultimately serving time in prison. Against Gotti's wishes, John Jr. later pled guilty to racketeering charges, signaling a potential shift away from the family's criminal legacy. Gotti's personal life was also strained by these events. His wife, Victoria, grew increasingly frustrated, blaming her husband for the life her son had chosen. She reportedly threatened to leave him if he did not allow their son to step away from the mob life. By 1998, Gotti's health began to deteriorate, and he was diagnosed with throat cancer. He was transferred to a medical facility in Missouri for treatment, but the cancer returned 2 years later. Gotti's health continued to decline, and on June 10, 2002, he passed away at the age of 61. The Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn prohibited Gotti's family from holding a requiem mass, though they later allowed a memorial service after his burial. His funeral was held outside of church grounds, with a modest procession that reflected his infamous reputation. Even in death, Gotti's legacy was divisive. The other New York Mafia families sent no representatives to his funeral, a pointed message disapproving of his leadership style. His aggressive tactics had led to numerous investigations and prosecutions that left the Gambino family in disarray. By the early 2000s, the organization was a shadow of its former self, with many of its members incarcerated or disconnected from the family's criminal activities. Gotti's life and legacy have left an indelible mark on American culture, epitomizing the rise and fall of a mob boss in an era when organized crime was slowly losing its grip on New York City. His story continues to serve as a cautionary tale of ambition, betrayal, and the consequences of living outside the law. Gotti's impact on American culture is complex. On one hand, his public presence and media-savvy image marked a shift in the underworld's traditional secrecy, as he became something of a celebrity. This shift brought unprecedented public attention to organized crime and its operations in the United States, leading to an intense crackdown on mafia families by law enforcement. Federal agencies developed new methods, including extensive use of wiretaps and RICO, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations, act prosecutions, which eventually dismantled Gotti's empire and weakened organized crime across the country. Ultimately, Gotti's legacy is one of paradox. While he became an icon of the mafia's golden age, he also marked the beginning of its end. His dramatic downfall showcased the vulnerabilities of even the most powerful mobsters and reshaped the public's view of organized crime, leaving behind a lasting impact on America's legal system and pop culture.
a nice old man. It's a figure. Type city of multiple apartments. And you went up. So yeah, I told him. Made down the tank towards down the roof. So what the fuck would you do? I'm gonna go here. You're starting with it. Angelo, he ain't bright enough. And he ain't enough for that position. He put me 40 on. He ain't old enough. Say, yeah, I think you need a, what they call it? A station. Yeah, right, a station. Say, yeah, no. I told him if I ever took him down, I would put him right there for respect to the gate. Respectful guy. And the other reason, figure out about it. And you, the fucker, and it's like, don't stop. Just do what you think. My brother told you about his wife. I mean, outside of the house of Frankie, that's it. No. Yeah, he's obviously excited, I'm happy. Yeah, good, be happy, but don't destroy it. Be happy. Don't take advantage of you. You gotta conduct yourself like a healthy game. You gotta forget about your Sundays home if you have to. You gotta be on an appointment every hour. Too fucking bad, you know what I mean? But then you make the other convenience, you know? Fucking people, and they don't understand. They gotta respect you. You know, this is true. That's what they give Joe Butch credit for, Frankie credit for. I think you know they both came with the jeans and the shape. The guy didn't come, but I actually like the come, you motherfucker. You know, they like. You want service? I want respect. It'll be a good fucking thing. It's gonna be a tough road. It's gonna be tough. That's the only thing I want to tell you. The world's going to be tough. It was a thing. Which is a marijuana, you know, the pot. Put this thing together, man. Whatever, make it. Never destroy it. Here's the guy. The whole legacy, the whole legacy, well, no way we would be, because it would be right. I mean, maybe 30 years it would deteriorate, but it would take that long to fucking succumb, you know. But then he said, you out with his home, and he killed me. I'm not getting rough shot, died. So I told him, Joe, this don't need 2 years now. You can't do it 3-5 weeks. You can't. You didn't do nothing 3-5 weeks, yeah? You can't. So long. You were thinking long before anything was done. Can't. So we got some fucking nice thing if you just be careful.